Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB pro bodybuilder. Today's guest is Jose Raymond. Jose, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome, man. Like I just said before we hit record, thank you for taking a little time out of your Saturday to chop it up with me. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Cool. So we're just going to jump right into things, Jose. I kind of like to start this podcast off with a couple of questions for all of my guests, just to kind of get the conversational ball rolling. So the first one that I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time? And then I want to ask you, just because you've been in the game for so long, after you answer that one, I kind of want to know, who are some of the younger guys in the game right now, or the sport right now, that you really appreciate?
Well, starting with my favorites of all time, it evolves, it changes, as obviously when I was really young, the first bodybuilder I ever saw was Lou Ferrigno. The show, The Incredible Hulk. I was obsessed with that show. Long before I even knew what bodybuilding was, I just knew I liked that guy, And then as I hit my teen years, my brother started bringing magazines around. I started seeing, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and I like the action, the big, crazy looking guys, but the physique that truly inspired me and that I got to see every day was my brother. He was larger than life to me and to pretty much everyone around the town we grew up in. And he was something that looked unattainable. He was a teenager in her early 20s, and everyone was accusing him of steroids, and he was natural. He was only 175 pounds, but he looked so good, just the way the skin wrapped around the muscle, and he was strong and athletic, and you could, that was the ultimate to me. So, that once I really got a grasp of not only the physiques, but what it takes to get there, my brother was the pinnacle to me. So, I obviously started training with him and trying to emulate what he did. And, we were vastly different. I'm 4 inches shorter than him. I'm like just a shorter, stocky, and he's not tall by any means, but he's, just has a completely different look, more of what today's classic physique look would be, as opposed to, I was always a short, stumpy looking guy. And, then I gradually continued. He competed at national level. On the world stage. He did the world championships multiple times, the world games, the Muscle Mania. And, I started following suit and traveling the world and doing my thing until I actually became a pro. That wasn't his goal. He didn't want to necessarily be a pro bodybuilder. He wanted just to use it as a stepping stone to get into, he was a more of a fitness model. So he was on a bunch of covers in every fitness publication around the world for a long time. And he had a very successful personal training business out in Gold's Gym, Venice. So he's been a staple in the fitness industry for well over 25 years. And, we went different routes, and I chose to go what more was suiting my physique. I was the shorter, thicker guy, and so I had my own success in pro bodybuilding, and I'm also a trainer, so I learned a lot from my brother. So not only physique wise, but just as a person, as a trainer, I owe everything I've done in my life to my older brother. But as far as today's guys, it's exciting. It's exciting, the new crew of guys that are making a statement and really making an impact. Obviously, Ian Valier, who's won 2 shows in a row. I've been a big fan of Ian for a couple of years now. I've been following him, and not because of any of the social media stuff, but I took a real hard look at how he conducts his preparation, his training. He's a serious guy when it comes to training, and he understands how to train. You can tell by watching his videos, and he's not throwing weight around. He's controlling weight, and his physique is showing incredible improvement in the last few years. And that's the kind of stuff I like to see. I like to see Nick Walker. He's very similar in that way, and his training methods are very methodical, and he's not just out there putting up videos of him bench pressing 600 pounds. I'm sure he could do those very impressive lifts, but he's showing things that he actually has built his physique, which is interesting, and it's kind of a change of pace from a lot of the stuff you see on social media. I mean, I like all the guys. I like Hunter Labrada. I love Sergio. Sergio's not necessarily a younger guy. I think he's over 35 now, 36, 37 maybe even. But he's a fairly new, in the last few years, really made his mark. And I think he's going to continue to do so. I mean, I love all these guys. A lot of them have been around since I was competing, like William Bonac and Hadi Chupan and obviously Rami and Brandon Curry. But the new younger guys are those guys that I just named that really stand out to me, obviously, and to everyone else, because they're winning shows. As far as guys that haven't won the big one, but I have the utmost respect and faith in, is like a Derek Lunsford. He's a 212 guy who should be open, who should be moving up soon. I think Derek has the combination of everything that it takes to be a really good champion bodybuilder. He's got the frame. If you just saw a picture of him, you would think he was 5'11", 6 foot tall, 280 pounds, but he's only like 5'6", and if that. But he's so wide and well put together. I'm really excited to see what he can do. To see, what happens in the next year. I'm not even talking about this Olympia. I'm talking about in 3 years. Where is Derek Lunsford going to be when he hits 30? Where is he going to be? What's going on? Did he make the move to open? Is he a top 3 Olympia Open guy? Which I have that much faith in him that I think he could be, for sure. So, and then a guy like Keon Pearson is another one similar to Derek, with all the God-given blessings, the genetics to be very, very special. That's what makes it exciting. Is it's very rare that you get the combination of genetics, desire, and the willpower. Those are 3 things that are very rare. You often have the genetics, but no desire or no willpower, no mental fortitude to be able to put it all together. And when you do, you get a Ronnie Coleman, a Jay Cutler, a Phil Heath. That's why they're so rare, because it's not often that the human can put all those things together. Emotions, mental health, emotions are very sensitive. People's brains are very sensitive. So once you get this gift, can you hold it all together? Can you take that physical attribute, those God-given talents, genetics, and you know, have the desire to want to be a bodybuilder. Because I'm sure there are accountants, lawyers, doctors out there that had unbelievable genetics and could have been bodybuilders, but they were smarter and chose to do something that can make some real money. You know, it's rare to see all those things come together. That's what intrigues me. That's what really I'm looking forward to seeing, is because clearly those two names, Derek Lunsford, Keon Pearson, are very special, and I'm eager to see, can they pull it off? Can they put it all together? So far, they've been doing a good job, but they're not. They're just scratching the surface of what they could be. So you know, it's exciting to see where they'll be in a couple of years.
For sure. One other name I want to bring up and just kind of get your just perspective, because I just so respect as a fan of what he's done, and that's Sean Clarita. I mean, you talk about somebody that's literally started from the back of the pack, and every single year he's just slowly but surely climbed and improved. And then last year we saw him win the 212 Olympia. Just touch on Sean a little bit, if you don't mind, Jose.
Well, Sean is precisely what I was just talking about, only he doesn't have the God-given structure, the perfect genetics to be. Now, obviously, he's got beautiful muscle shape and all that, but he's, you know, barely 5 feet tall, and he's not super wide like Derek Lunsford. He doesn't have the 100% ultimate genetics to be where he's at right now. But what he does have is precisely what I want to see if those other guys have. And it's a giant set of balls. And he's got the heart of a lion. You know, he knew he was going to be champion. He knew it. I didn't know he was. I'm like, the kid's great. I thought it was adorable. This little, like, looked like an action figure. I'm like, but holy shit, before you know it, he's Mr. Olympia 212. He's you know, he's precisely what people should look in the mirror and see, because he proves that it's possible. If you have the balls, if you have the commitment, the belief in yourself, and the ability to work hard and put it together one day at a time, before days become weeks and months and years. And he's been at it for a long time, and he's now #1 in the world. You know, that's precisely what I'm talking about. If everyone had Sean Clarita's heart and commitment, then the world would be a better place. People would be hugely successful. Unfortunately, there's people with amazing talents that aren't doing a whole lot because they don't have that commitment, that ability to string together their efforts in the right direction. Yeah, Sean is amazing. I'm so happy and honored that I was able to witness it firsthand, up close, you know, from him as an amateur, me meeting him as a young kid. We both came up the same route, the natural bodybuilding route, and we did the Team Universe, and we're both Team Universe winners. And so I knew who he was early on. And I met him at a show in Hartford, Connecticut, back in 2010. And he was tiny. He had to be 118 pounds, 120 pounds. But he looked, there was just something you could tell was from his skin to his eyes to everything was perfectly proportioned. Like, this little dude was, that's the only way I can describe him. He looked like an action figure. But he was little and young, and he'd look right at me and be like, yeah, I'm gonna do what you're doing. I'm gonna be a champion. I'm like, oh, and I'm not a big guy, and I felt like I was dwarf him. I could have ate him for breakfast. He was so little, but he knew long before anyone else. And it was awesome. It really is awesome to watch. And by the time he surpassed me, I was already on my way out. So there was never any like, oh, that little fucker, there was never any animosity. It was always just happy for him to see his success. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I thought it was a very close show for him and Kamal. You really could have gone either way and there would have been no problem with that. But once you settled in and accepted it, I'm so happy for him. And there were some pictures, and that's the thing, like with Kamal, beautiful, every angle, just beautiful symmetry, and it's just perfect, everything. But there's no shot that you're like, oh my God, that is crazy, mind-blowing. What the hell? With Sean, there are a couple shots with Sean, so they're totally different in that way, where when you see Sean and hitting certain shots, you're like, yeah, all right, I can see where he's close there, or it's close, and then he hits a shot, and you're like, holy shit, no way, no way, it doesn't even make sense. And that's, I think, what won it for him, is that baffling, mind-boggling, never before seen on a body like that, that height, those proportions. That's what made him special. That's what separated him from Kamal, is that, Kamal might be a victim of his own symmetry, of his own perfection, is that nothing jumps out. His chest isn't super crazy compared to his shoulders. His arms aren't nuts. His legs aren't, it just is all perfect. And where Sean just has a few lights out crazy things, like the iconic images of Ronnie Coleman, back in 2003 or whenever it was, when he was pulling his lats back, and no one had ever seen anything like that before. The glutes, the hamstrings, the Christmas tree, it's so iconic. And then Jay's quad stomp, no one had ever seen a quad, the shoulder to waist hip ratio, the fullness, the conditioning. Sean was pretty iconic last night. Like, no one in the world has ever seen that combination on a little frame like that. I'll forever remember that physique he brought to the stage, because it was so freaky. The one that stands out most to me was just his front relaxed when he came out, and it looked like, I'm like, no way, is that morphed? What is that? No way. And yeah, I mean, he was an iconic figure last year in bodybuilding for how special that was. I mean, out of anyone, I mean, he blew Rami away as far as conditioning and proportion. I think he did a shoot with Hadi Chupan the next day, and Hadi's got to be 6 inches taller than him, and he hung with Hadi. I mean, it's not like you would think. A couple of years ago, you'd have been like, oh, Hadi would blow him off the stage. No, I think, Sean is so good now, he can stand with anyone. He really can. And I mean that. I mean, like, if you took 35 IFBB pros right now and put them in a show together, and Sean Clarita was one of them, and Rami was one of them, I bet Sean would be in that first call out. There's not 5 or 6 other guys in the world that are better than him, even though they're 6, 7, 8, 10 inches taller and upwards of 100 pounds bigger. Doesn't make them better. Sean is definitely definitely within the top 10 physiques on the planet, regardless of weight and height. And that's special. That's a cool thing.
For sure. We're gonna, I kind of like to usually just get into my guest backstory, but you have your own podcast, No Way Jose, on muscular development every week. And there's a lot of podcasts out there that kind of touch on that stuff. So I'd rather just spend a little bit more time just touching on some different topics with you, Jose. But I just kind of would love to kind of hear, not necessarily for myself, because I've listened to a lot of your content, but for some of the other people that are tuning in, just kind of touch on like your contest history. I know you, like you mentioned earlier, you started off competing naturally, and then you got into the NPC and IFBB and all that type of stuff. But just touch on your contest history and just a little bit of that journey into the IFBB and being one of the pioneers of the 212 category.
So I started in 1993, did my first show at 18. Weight training started out as more of a coping mechanism, a way to relieve stress. And my brother and I had weights in the house in the basement. And, as we were doing it, we realized that it could benefit us in more ways than just stress, but to make us stronger for football. And so we were both all-star football players in our town we grew up in. And I wrestled in college. I played football in college, and it led to one thing led to another. I was getting bigger, stronger, faster. But more than that, I was clearly, my body type was different than most in that, all my buddies were training in high school to get better for sports, but nobody looked like that. I looked like that at a very young age. I was, thickly muscled and vascular and just had a different look. I was accused of taking steroids at 14 years old. I didn't even know what the hell steroids was. I got called out of algebra class. Back then, they had a little phone on the wall. The teacher answers the phone, looks up at me, and he's like, "Oh, you got to go down to the athletic director's office." I went, "Oh, okay." I went down there, and my football coach was there, and the athletic director was there, and they were like, "We got to test you." I'm like, "Are you shitting me?" All right, fine. So obviously, I wasn't taking anything, and they end up sharing the results with the entire school committee because they all thought something was up, and it wasn't. I was just a freaky looking young kid. So I started competing at 18. I won right out of the gate, and that feeling was different than anything I'd ever done. Every other endeavor involved a teammate. A teammate in a coach, a quarterback, someone else that could steal your shine or and this was like, this is me. This is from my authentic hard work. And you could express yourself, through your posing, through the music you use. And it really sucked me in. And I knew that win, lose, or draw, this was all me. This was something that also could keep me under wraps. Like in order to do well in a show, I would have to dedicate 4 or 5 months for contest prep, to not be out partying and not be out getting into trouble. And it was really a good way for me to focus and keep out of trouble. And I noticed right away that, when I was focused on a contest, my laundry was done, my car was cleaner, I had a lot more order in my life. And I liked that. So the militant aspect of bodybuilding is good for anyone. So it sucked me in. I was for a period of time, I was doing a show what felt like every weekend. I was competing in 3 or 4 different organizations. And a lot of them were the natural organizations. It was back then it was called ANBC. There was OCB, AAU. There was a bunch of them, and the NPC, and also the Muscle Mania. So I was competing a ton. And as I learned more and more that the best of the best were coming from the NPC, Jay Cutler wasn't doing the OCB or the Muscle Mania. There were some great ones on Muscle Mania, and that was a great tool to meet other athletes. I met Stan McQuay there. It was really cool going out to California. That was my first time out there competing in Redondo Beach. And I met Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was just crazy how things happened. And but once I had won the Muscle Mania, I was like, now what? I wanted to win the Team Universe. I wanted to be the best natural bodybuilder in the world, or what I thought, But lo and behold, I end up winning the Team Universe, going to the World Championships. I get the opportunity. I was at my best. I was in great condition, and the show wasn't natural. I was really misled or naive, I should say. And the guys there were every bit as freaky as the nationals. I was like, oh wow, okay. I just wasted my mind space thinking that that's what I was doing. But I learned a lot, and I eventually end up winning the USAs. I won the nationals the next year. I went on a tear of winning, and it seemed like every division that I went to, I won. I was a lightweight. And back then, Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler were the biggest names. They were both 100 pounds bigger than me. So I wasn't going to accept my pro card, because then what? Then my career's over. So instead, I went up a weight class. I went from lightweight to welterweight. Then I won the USAs, the Universe, and the Nationals at welterweight. And I was still only 165 pounds. So I'm like, all right, I'll move up to middleweight. So I went and won the USAs and the Nationals as a middleweight. And then they started the 202 division, or what originally started at 210, the 210 division. And so I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That gives me some more room, and will give me an opportunity to, 210 was still a lot bigger than I was, but it was a little more reasonable. But then after 210, I don't know if you remember a guy named Silvio Samuel. He was awesome, and he was winning open shows and the 210. So he was like winning everything, and it just showed that it wasn't a big enough a discrepancy, because a 210-pound guy can beat everyone if he's that good. So they brought it down to 202. And that's when things really started evolving. And, the smaller guys, David Henry, Kevin English, Flex Lewis, myself, Mark Dugdale, Eduardo Correa, Tricky Jackson. There was a lineup of us that were all, really good. And at first it was David Henry and Kevin English. But then this young kid came out, Flex Lewis, and you could see that he was going to be special. Not only about his physique on stage, but how he carried himself, how he was planning to utilize his strengths of marketing, of talking, to help bring this thing to the next level. And they grabbed on with both hands, they being the IFBB, and they ran with it. So they knew also Flex is a little taller than most 212 guys, or certainly taller than the really short ones, but he was not going to max out his frame at 202. He was not going to be his best. In fact, I beat him at 202. And that wasn't going to be a good look for him. So I know in my heart that they moved that weight limit for Flex Lewis. They absolutely did. And it was a great call because it made him be able to flourish and be the champion he is today. And in the whole division exploded. And all of a sudden we were getting contracts. We were getting guest appearances, flown all over the world. It was just an amazing time for bodybuilding for us, because those opportunities weren't there 25 years ago. If you weren't one of the biggest, baddest, you weren't going to be, you weren't going to be making that kind of money. You weren't going to be able to be a feature guy on magazine covers, having your own column in a magazine. It was really, really a great time. And, now, unfortunately, you have to depend on social media. It's all about how you yourself portray yourself on social media, how many clicks you get, how many likes, how many shares, how many views. That's where your worth is. It's no longer like how good of a trainer you are, how well spoken you are, how well you present yourself, and how you do in competition. There are guys who are terrible in competition and monsters on social media. So that has changed drastically. But yeah, it was a great time. I'm so lucky to have been involved in it at the time that I was. And I played a big role in it. As you said earlier, it was the camaraderie between me, Flex, and that whole group of guys, that we were able to build something special, to have what you have today, to have a Sean Clarita and a Kamal and all these guys. Kamal's older than me, but he was an amateur bodybuilder because it wasn't fruitful. It wasn't a smart business decision for him to compete as a pro when he was being paid so much to represent Qatar in the World Championships. A lot of people don't know that over in the Middle East, those countries have great pride in their bodybuilders, and they make a lot of money just competing as an amateur in the World Championships. So, we, meaning me, Flex, and that group of guys, were able to create something where a lot of these guys were willing to forego their amateur status and come compete in the 212. Like Sami Al-Haddad. Sami Al-Haddad is one of the greatest in the world. He's from Bahrain. And he was another one. He's like, why would I ever leave amateur competition when I make so much money representing my country? And Kamal. And there's more of them. Baitola from Iran. Those guys all made a choice to compete as pros, knowing that there was a brighter future because of what had been built over here. So, very cool.
Absolutely. What do you think, or not what do you think, but in terms of like when you kind of like finally took your IFBB pro card, and then the kind of the transformation of 210, 202, 212, and then when the 212 really exploded, and the contracts for you were coming in, you were traveling the world, like, and I mean, you guys as top level professional bodybuilders, you guys are like rock stars, there's, it's kind of like almost like a cult following, but there's a huge following and a lot of eyes and attention. What was that like for you personally, kind of in the midst of that fame and kind of notoriety? What was it, just kind of like the fulfillment of like a dream come true?
Kinda. Yes, it was very cool. Showing up, I was at an event in Australia in a place called Townsville, and there was hundreds. There was hundreds of people lined up at 9 a.m. waiting for the event to open, and I went and videoed it all, wrapped around the building, and I could not believe it. Like it was just mind blowing in Australia, and at the Olympias and the Arnolds, the lines of people that were coming to meet you or shake your hand and take a picture with you, and was just wild. And part of me didn't feel like it was even me. I felt like I was a fan with them, standing in line, just wanting to be part of the whole experience. I didn't feel like they were there for me. And part of me learned how to handle it at a young age, because everywhere we went, my brother was a spectacle. Everywhere we went. And he kind of just like was like a ditzy blonde, like didn't even pay attention to it. Like, oh, I'm like, dude, you see these people staring at you? Oh, see what that guy said? He's like, I don't care. He's like, that's great, He's like, and he was just very humble, and I learned how to interact with that, and not to take myself too seriously. So it was never a dream come true per se, because that wasn't what I got into bodybuilding for. I got into bodybuilding as a stress reliever, coping mechanism. The fame or success, the contracts, the money, was just all a side effect of something I love to do. So it was a bonus. And I never treated it as my job. I did treat it as a job as far as how hard I worked at it, but I knew it would be gone one day. And I knew that I couldn't depend on it forever. So I was like squirreling it away. I didn't spend frivolously and buy a new Mercedes with new rims and stupid stuff. I put my money away and saved it until I could buy a house. And if anyone's from New England area, how crazy expensive houses are here. It's just stupid. So I was able to do a lot of great things, and it was a very cool experience, and I'm so lucky that I got to experience that and meet all those people. And she is met. I feel like it was another lifetime ago, of all the countries I've seen, all the places I've been. I feel like it was someone else, and I just, someone told me the story about it, and I feel like maybe I lived through someone else's eyes. It was just wild. I cannot get over the amount of places and countries and cities that I've been to, and I'm so blessed. And it never would have been possible without bodybuilding. So very cool.
Absolutely. Somebody I want to touch on that I know you have a great relationship with and coached you for many years, Chris Aceto, very well connected with Jay Cutler as well, who's out from kind of the same area you're from. But I've heard you talk about Chris on your own podcast on some different content that you've put out. But I just kind of wanted to give you the opportunity to touch on Chris and your relationship with him. And I'm kind of interested because, I know you're a longtime trainer and you coach people. But just touch on the relationship you have with Chris, and why you just appreciate him and value him so much. But then also what makes him such a great coach, because I mean, he goes back all the way back, to the, 80s and 90s, those heydays of, Venice Beach, Gold's Gym, and all that out in Southern California. So just touch on Chris Aceto, your relationship with him, what he means to you. And then again, why you, from your perspective, he's such a great coach, or what makes him such a great coach.
Well, Chris is very special in the sense that he still carries around a briefcase with handwritten notes. Everything is very personalized. He's an old school guy. He writes everything down, and that's the simplicity of it. And that's what I took away from Chris, and what I implement in my own coaching is we're a lot alike in that sense, is that A plus B is C. Like it's very simple. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. And the simpler you keep things in any facet of life, the better it's going to be. There's no reason to overcomplicate things. And I really was impressed with his ability to communicate that to me, and I grabbed it right away, and I appreciate it, because I see all this nonsense online. Other coaches are doing this, that, and it really made an impact on me on how simple things should be and need to be. And Chris, became a friend, because we do see things so similarly. He'll ask me a question knowing exactly what my answer is going to be, and he'll always laugh. And he shares a lot with me, whether it be family things or his other clients. Be like, oh, look at this guy. What do you think of this? And I'll break it down for him within seconds. And he's like, yep, I knew you were going to say that. Yep. And I do the same. I send him pictures of when I was helping Nate get ready for his shows, and he'd be like, holy cow. And he's like, what show is he doing? And I said, Universe. He's like, what? He goes, oh, I thought he was doing Tampa. And I'm like, no. That's how good Nate looked, but Chris went to college went to the same college my older brother went to. So he's a local guy, somewhat. He's from Maine. It's a couple hours away from me, but he's a New England guy. And, once he started making his impact, I heard of Chris Aceto. Shit, I was probably 13 years old, 12, 13 years old by the time I'd heard his name. And, it wasn't until I was around 33, 34, 35 that I got to meet him. And I didn't start working with him until I was 37. And he was fantastic. We had both heard of each other, obviously. He had seen my shows. He always had great things to say about me and my physique. And then when we finally met, he was like, I would love to work with you. He's like, you can win the Olympia. He's like, I know, I just wasn't nailing my condition the way that I should have. I could, but I couldn't do it and maintain the size that I had built. So there was a guy in my class, Eduardo Correa, who's one of the best in the world. And he was like, at the time, coaches were loyal to that guy. That's it. He didn't want to work with another 212 guy and get into, this guy against this. He just wanted to put everything he could into Eduardo. And he said, listen, if Eduardo goes up into the open, then I'll work with you. And I'm like, that's cool. I get it. And then he realized that that we were all friends and we all just wanted each other to be their best. I wanted to go against the best Eduardo, and Eduardo wanted to go against the best version of me. And we enjoyed seeing this new and improved version of each other, which pushed us and made us better. And, we never went into a show thinking, I hope Eduardo's off, never. It was like, I want to see Flex. I can't wait to see Flex. I can't wait to see David. I can't wait to see Eduardo. These guys look nuts. And we'd be backstage looking at each other like, holy shit. And we knew we had to bring it. So every year we'd come back nuttier and nuttier and crazier. So Chris knew that. And he's like, you know what? If you don't care, I don't care. I'll work with both of you guys. Eduardo doesn't care. I'm like, let's do it, and sure enough, that was when we both brought it to the next level. We were getting bigger and harder and freakier and more consistent. And it was just snowballing. Every one of us was pushing the other one to be better and better and better. And, before you knew it, this year it was me flexing Kevin, me flexing Eduardo. Eduardo could have won that show. I could have won that show. And we were flip-flopping, traveling the world. He beat me at the Olympia, then I'd beat him in England. Then I'd beat him. He beat me at the Olympia, and I'd beat David in England or Korea. It was crazy. It was really exciting. There was no shoe-in win. Even Flex, even though he won 7 Olympias, there was never a shoe-in for him. It was always he had to bring his best, or he had a possibility of losing because one of us was going to bring the heat. And, that made it exciting. It was really cool. So, yeah, Chris played an integral role in my career, not just mine, but obviously Jay and so many others. And, I'm still great friends with Chris. I talk to him almost daily still. We're sending texts because we're both so heavily involved in the bodybuilding world. But, we bounce questions off each other all the time. He'll send me pictures of new properties that he's bought. And what do you think of this? He knows I love houses and apartments and the renovations. And, we just have a lot in common in so many ways. I just love Chris. I think he's such a superhuman, and there's so much admirable about him as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a businessman. There's just so much to admire about him, and his success, his work ethic. He doesn't stop. And, if I could get even one smidge of what he's got, just by associating with him, if some of that can rub off on me, then I'll be blessed. That's what I love about Chris most, is he's so well-rounded, and he's so good at so many things, and he's just a genuine person.
Was before you connected with Chris, did you do all of your prep on your own?
Yeah. Because I went to school, I studied nutrition. I've been training since I was a little kid. I studied training, kinesiology, structure and function, all these different things to understand my body better. And through trial and error, I was getting damn good at nailing it. I won 8 national titles, and I was the best conditioned guy in every show. So I obviously knew how to get in shape. And, and obviously my brother played a great role in that as well. And, we would bounce things off each other all the time. And because that's what he studied at Springfield College, and I went to Plymouth State College, and I learned a lot. And when I got in school, it was exciting because I finally got to study something that I was interested in. And I grabbed hold of it, and I learned a lot. And I didn't need a coach. I didn't need and to be honest with you, I wasn't using any of the gear, the supplements, nothing. So I didn't need anyone to tell me how to do that. All I knew was what I needed to eat and what I needed to expend to burn the body fat, to get as lean as I needed to be. And yeah, I used George Farah for 2 shows. Oddly enough, I won both shows. But that was all me. You know, he and I were arguing about cardio, like he was like, you know, I want you to have more carb, 300 grams of carb and no cardio, or 5 minutes cardio. I'm like, what? I'm like, dude, that goes against everything I've ever done to get in shape. And I listened to a certain amount of it, and I was able to win the Tampa Pro in 2010, but I was not happy with the condition that I was in. I was not happy. So I went completely off for the following week. I went up to Hartford to compete. I knew I was competing against David Henry, who was the hardest guy in bodybuilding at the time. And I'm like, there's no way this, 20 minutes of cardio is going to cut it. So I was doing 2 hours every day leading up to the show. It took 6 days of boom, 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 boom. I end up being like 7 or 8 pounds lighter, leaner, drier. And I beat David Henry for the first time. And I knew then, I'm like, this, George, great guy. But I knew that we didn't click on our basic principles and how to get in shape. And I was just done with it. I'd rather do it myself. And, the next year, again, I came in absolutely bananas at the New York Pro, and I beat an unbelievable version of Flex Lewis. So I'm like, I know I'm on to something on my own. Well, then the following year, they bumped up the weight division. And that's when I knew, I know how to get in shape, but I don't know how to maintain size and weight while getting in shape. And that's when Chris and I connected. And, he was able to, I was already 37 years old. He was able to help me put on 10 pounds of stage weight, of stage muscle over the next few years, to the point where I was, winning the Arnold Classic and placing second at the Olympia. And I think I won, I want to say 7 or 8 shows with Chris. So, I had won at least 4 prior to Chris, and at least 7 or 8 or 9 with him. So, it was really, really cool. And, I had learned so much, and I always preach to people, in order for you to get the most out of a coach, you need to learn the most about yourself prior to that, and go through experience. And I always say I'm bad for coaching business because I do not recommend it. I recommend you learn trial and error a lot before you go hiring a coach. Because guess what the coach is going to do? He's going to do a lot of trial and error with you. And it's not cheap. Now, granted, a coach's ideas and a coach's eye for when he sees what you're gaining and losing and how you're progressing, his ability to digest that and make a plan moving forward is going to be better than yours if you know nothing. But if you spend a lot of time and energy and effort in learning what it is you're looking at, that's part of the problem. Most people don't even know what they're looking at. They'll see a physique and be like, oh, this guy's awesome, he should have won. I'm like, no, you're not even close. And I figure that out through the years by talking to people, reading stuff online, reading comments. And instead of going in and shitting on the person, I absorb it, and I'm like, that person clearly has no idea what they're talking about. And that's not me being pompous. It's me being educated over the course of over 30 years of following. And I didn't just follow bodybuilding. I was obsessed with it. I read everything I could. I saw every interview. I read every magazine. I learned everything about nutrition, about supplements, in about how people's psyche, how important that is. I attribute psychology to bodybuilding as more, if not as much, if not more, than the gear. That's how important your brain is to how well you're going to do in this sport. If you've ever had an interview and you spoke to the people who are hugely successful, they're different mentally. That they look at things differently. They're able to break it down and make it simple. You ever see an interview with Dorian Yates, that guy behind you, Ronnie Coleman, Arnold Schwarzenegger? He was the first one that we saw being interviewed, and you knew something was different about this guy. You knew it wasn't just his charisma and his, his personality, but there was something about him that made him special, and that was his mental fortitude to be able to break down barriers and go beyond what was thought possible. And part of it is intelligence. Part of it is just strong will and mentally believing in himself. And all these huge stars in the bodybuilding world, whether it's Arnold, Jay Cutler, Dorian Yates, Ronnie Coleman, or even, like I said earlier, Sean Clarita, Flex Lewis, they all share that common thing, and it is the will, the drive to not give a shit what you say or think about him, and be able to put that in the back of their mind to focus on that one goal, and that's to be the best. And I put Chris Aceto in that category because people have been shitting on him for 30 years. Haters have been talking stupid things about him, and he's able to put that nonsense aside and be hugely successful, not only in the bodybuilding world, in the coaching world, the nutrition world, but in the business world. You don't have the amount of success that he has without being different, having the strength to believe in yourself and be hugely successful. I'm just ranting now. I don't know what the question was now.
No, that's
but I
cool.
answered it.
It's great. And it's actually, you touched on something while you were chatting there that I want to wrap up this conversation with. And that is, you're also a judge. You judge at competitions, and it's something, as I consume a lot of bodybuilding content, it seems like there's two sides that I hear of people. Like, I hear people breaking down a physique, like body part by body part. And then they kind of say, well, by this analysis, this individual should have won, or they won. But then on the other spectrum, I hear people saying, well, they break a physique down, not necessarily body part by body part, but by just the overall flow of the physique and kind of the overall package. So can you kind of just touch on how you, as a bodybuilding judge at a competition, how you kind of assess a physique, and then just kind of decipher between, like, how can somebody kind of win, like, let's say, all of the body parts, but then still lose a competition, if that kind of makes sense? Because I hear you and Ron Harris talking about a lot. I hear a lot of different people assessing winners and people who lose in different ways, but kind of just touch on how you assess a physique in somebody who is going to, win a competition.
Well, it's definitely not body parts. It's not body part building. It's bodybuilding. It's the combination of all those things. It is the symmetry, the size, the musculature, the conditioning, all those things matter. And the guy who has the best amount of all of those things combined is going to win. And that goes with figure and bikini and physique and all the divisions. It's not who has the craziest arms. Oftentimes with bikini, it's not the girl with the biggest glutes. It's the best combination of all the attributes that matter. With bodybuilding, I think it's the simplest division to judge because it is the criteria has been established so long ago, and it is musculature, it is symmetry, not only symmetry, top to bottom, side to side, front to back, but how it flows within the other body parts. You can just see it when you know it when you see it. It is you're never going to have a guy who has terrible legs and huge arms and huge chest but terrible back. He's not going to win against a guy who has okay arms, okay chest, and just it flows well in the conditioning. It when you see it. It is, and that's something that comes in time, I suppose. For example, this past weekend, last week was the Texas Pro, and the Kuklo and Ian debate, Kuklo, Ian, and Klahar debate. Now you're always going to have people that favor a certain look, but when all is said and done, Ian won that show because he had the most of all the things that matter. They both, him and Kuklo, have beautiful shape, very good symmetry, very good musculature, very good conditioning. Now Ian ended up having more of all those things. So that, to me in person, it would have been a lot easier to judge than from what I'm seeing online because I wasn't there. But whenever I'm there, I can make the call usually that is the right call. And yeah, I judge. I love judging because it's fun, and I get a front row seat, at a bodybuilding show. I love watching bodybuilding to begin with, but imagine having a front row seat and you're into it. You have to study everything you're looking at and compare them and make a decision quickly. The head judge will look to you and I'm still trying to decide. And he's like, you set, what do you need? And I'm like, oh shit. Sometimes it's really close. This past weekend in the heavyweight division, the amateur in Vermont, there was two guys that were so close. One was bigger and rounder. One was a little more vascular, a little harder looking. And, it was close. You could have rewarded each for their strengths, but which one did I think had the best combination of what we're judging? So that's what it comes down to. It's a combination of everything. You have to check all the boxes. And it's very rare that anyone has all of them. And when they do, it's an easy call. Boom, this guy wins easy. So oftentimes it's people are lacking certain things, and that's when it becomes hard to judge. Who should win this? They're both a mess, but you have to judge. Or they're both perfect. If you have an all-time best Phil Heath next to an all-time best Dexter Jackson, like, how would you judge that? They're just so well put together, so well conditioned. You know, you'd have to make the call, and it would come down to who has the least flaws. That's it.
Cool. I know you're not necessarily like a motivational kind of guy, or have like, any words that you want to, put out there, but I do want to give you an opportunity, Jose, if there's anything that you kind of want to leave the listeners, please feel free to do that. And then, if anybody wants to, connect with you on social media or anything like that, website, go ahead, share that if you don't mind.
Yeah, my Instagram is the Boston Mass, THEE. A lot of nicknames are goofy. Mine was given to me by Ron Harris. Ron has been a long-time writer in the bodybuilding industry, and he was writing an article on me, I want to say back in 2007, in muscular development, and that just stuck, the Boston Mass. Anyone that gives themselves a nickname is a goof. I would never give myself a nickname. But yeah, the Boston Mass, you can hit me up there, or you can email me at jose@thebostonmass.com. You can check out my website. People have been saying there's some problems with the Shopify. So if ever you order something or do anything and it doesn't get through, just send me a DM on Instagram or email me. And that's it. I don't have any motivational things. I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. I don't want to be a preacher. The one thing I can share is my knowledge and my love for the bodybuilding world, and I have a lot of experience in this world because I've spent more than half my life living it every day. So that's why I'm on podcasts every week, multiple times a week, because I have insight that not a lot of people do. Not only do I love it, but I've lived it, and I continue to live it. I train every day myself, but I work with clients every day, and I love it. And I'm now feeling the joy through helping other people and seeing people succeed as much, if not more, than when I was doing it myself. I get more nervous, more excited when Nate's on stage, or this past weekend, Amy or Luke, or, when these guys are on stage, I get just as excited. So I'm looking forward to continuing, and I'm around. I'll be around for a long time, hopefully, God willing. Awesome. But that's it. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. We went over the time, I'm sure, yes, by far. But
yeah.
You know what? That makes it interesting. Once I get going, I don't have a shut off button. I noticed your name is Quentin Versace, huh?
No, my last name is pronounced Vars.
Vars. That's not as cool. It's Versace.
No, that's definitely not as cool. But thank you again. Like I kind of said in the introduction, thank you, Jose, for just chopping it up with me. I'm just a gym owner in Iowa that has a passion for podcasting. And for any of you listeners out there, Nate Tello, who you've referenced several times, he's been a guest on Behind the Muscle podcast. So if you guys want to listen to his episode, and then Ron Harris, who is the online editor for Muscular Development, who you've also brought up. He was a guest on my other podcast, 127 Fit podcast. So if you guys want to listen to those, check those out. But thank you so much, Jose, for spending some time with me. Listeners, thank you so much once again for your listening ears. They're always greatly appreciated. Just one huge favor I'd ask all of you, as you guys have found a great value in Jose's episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, just go ahead and share this episode on your social media stories, on your social media platforms. Also, another huge help with the podcast is when you subscribe, you leave a written review, a written comment. All of that stuff helps within the algorithms of social media and podcasting. And finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.